If you have a Prius or a Lexus CT200H and it's making this noise, you need to watch this video because you have a failing head gasket and it's gonna be catastrophic. When I discovered that this was officially my problem, and when I accepted that this was officially the problem that I had, I was pretty optimistic with how long I thought it was going to take. I thought I was gonna bust it out in a day total. And you'll see that that was in fact not the case.
It is Saturday morning, December 30th, I think. My goal is to try to get this thing done today. Day 2 is day 3. It is January 2nd.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the garage once again. We have a big one today. This is probably the most ambitious project I have taken on and at least posted to this channel here. Some of you may have watched the last video, or one of the last videos, with the Prius, where it was starting to have the dreaded Prius engine shake. And at that time, I didn't really know what was going on. I wasn't that familiar with all the problems that those engines can have. And that was about 2 months ago. I went in and I cleaned out the EGR system pretty thoroughly, put it back on. The car's been generally okay since then. And in true fashion, as many of us do when there is the chance of a failing head gasket, we do everything we can to convince ourselves that that is not the problem. But as you'll see here in the upcoming video, there was very obviously a failed head gasket after I did the real tests that you need to do for that. If you have these issues with your car, you need to watch this video because there's a lot of information that's already out there, and a lot of it's good information, but there are also a lot of steps that are just kind of breezed over, skipped in the actual replacement of the part, fixing the problem, all that kind of stuff. You'll see here that I not only replaced the head gasket, but I also just swapped out the head entirely. That's something, if you've done this kind of work before, it's generally pretty good practice to make sure that you have a fresh machined surface so the bottom of your head is flat, especially with these aluminum heads. I didn't have the time to take it to a machine shop, so I got very lucky, found a shop that had one in stock, was up there less than 12 hours later picking the thing up. I probably overpaid a little bit for it, but it wasn't exorbitantly expensive to begin with, so I was happy to do it. The shop owner was a really nice older gentleman, and I feel like I got a good product from him. This video isn't a step-by-step of how to take things apart. Anybody can take things apart, but there are a decent amount of very specific things you have to do when you put everything back together that have to be done right. And a few of those things were not mentioned in other videos that I saw, and I had to learn along the way. I had a few pretty significant setbacks that were very frustrating. So I wanted to put this out there just to help anybody who's tackling this, because it's very doable with, for the most part, normal hand tools. You might have to rent a torque wrench or something like that. But it just takes time. You'll see this took, starting Friday night, the, what was that, 29th of December, and officially finished last night, the 2nd of January. So it's involved. You can do it. Let's just dive into it.
So the Prius is acting up again, doing a lot of shaking and rattling. So we are going to do an actual head gasket test with the fluid tester. So I really hope nothing shows up. Don't do this with a warm engine. I'm just very brave. Just got this tester from Oreilly. It was 10 bucks for the fluid, 28 bucks to rent the little tool. And then that's 28 bucks it comes back to me. Oh, I'm good. Somebody didn't clean it out. All right, we're going to put the car into maintenance mode. So, let's see if I can get this right, first of all. Didn't work. All right, I think I figured it out. We have our car in auxiliary mode, so push power button twice, but don't hold the brake. That'll start the systems. Maintenance required soon. Go away. You have to have the energy monitor screen up. So what we're going to do is gas pedal twice, release it, brake, neutral, gas pedal twice, park, gas pedal twice, and now we're maintenance mode shows up. You're holding your foot on the brake this whole time, and then you push start or power, and the car is on. Okay, so we'll let it warm back up slightly here, and then we'll add the fluid to our little tester, and it says to let it run through that for 2 whole minutes doing the squeeziness. So it was inconclusive whether or not the new fluid was different color. So I'm going to do this again quick. Now that the engine's run a little more, we'll see. And there are the very unfortunate results. It's not yellow, but it's definitely green. Shit. Alright, it is Saturday morning, December 30th, I think. And once again, we are doing some unplanned work on the cars today. Yesterday I discovered that the Prius officially does have a head gasket failure, and after some brief panic searching on the internet, I found a shop that has remanufactured heads for that car because it's a very common problem, and I was concerned because they're actually in fairly high demand. So right now we are cruising up to the north side of Los Angeles. It's going to be about an hour and a half drive. And of course it's pouring down rain right now. Huge storm that's been coming through from the northwest. So it ought to be an interesting day. I was up past midnight last night finding all of the parts that I need. I actually think I sourced everything that I need from Oreilly Auto Parts. Luckily, I did find a few things from the dealer also that I may need to get, but my goal, this is very optimistic, my goal is to try to get this thing done today. So it's 7 a.m. right now. If I could be home by 10 or 10:30, that would be awesome. Really doubt that's going to happen. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see how it goes. Wish me luck. We are just down the street from the machine shop. It's like, what is it? 8:38. They're supposed to open at 8:30. Nobody's there yet, so we're gonna try to get a coffee. I guess chill for like 10 minutes and head back over there. Talk to you in a minute. All right, we have a refurbished head that appears to be for my car, for our lovely Prius. And so we are on our way home. It's 9:10. Ugh. Hopefully we can be home by 10:30. We shall see. We are back home, back in the garage, getting ready to start tearing down the Prius. So you can see here we got everything set out, got our new tools. There's our fancy new refurbished head, timing chain kit, full head gasket, bunch of other stuff, head bolts, some tools. So what I'm going to do first is I'm gonna open up the top of the engine, just look at it, make sure the head does in fact match. I don't think there's any reason that it wouldn't, but I should probably verify that before I start taking stuff apart. So, looks like it's gonna rain, and it's starting to right now. Great. Alright, well, we'll figure this out. See you in a bit. Alright, the first thing we're gonna do here is make sure that we actually have all the parts that I think we have. Alright, we got 10 head bolts. Receipts, those are important. 2 little gaskets for the oil adapter. Crankshaft front seal. Triple square bits, need these to remove the head. Cleaner. RTV. Okay. Good start. This is the timing setup. I may not actually even do that. We'll see how it looks. And here is our head gasket set. Should have a head gasket, exhaust manifold, intake manifold, valve cover, some grommets. Should have a lot of stuff in there. This was 120 bucks, but it should have most of the gaskets I need. Okay, so we have the front crank seal, which means that this one can go back. So I guess what we need to do now is just start taking this apart. I am not going to do like a detailed how-to on this. I really want to see how long this takes. If you guys want to see me tear apart the top of the engine and put it back together, check out the last Prius video. Once we get down to the head, I'll start filming a little more. Alright, it is 1:10. I don't know if you can see that. In 10 minutes, I took off the whole cowl, wipers, all that junk, and I ate a pancake. So I think we're making good progress. So we just took out the crank pulley, harmonic balancer, whatever you want to call it. This big ass bolt here that was probably, I think when you put it back on, it torques to like 190. If you just try to take it off without really popping it loose or anything first, it's very difficult. So I just took my huge cheap
Harbor Freight electric impact. Spun right off. All right, we are getting ready to take off the timing cover here, and just want to get a quick video of this because I don't remember how to do it, but it's just all these 12 millimeters go all the way around this case. We just got the crank pulley off. It is at TDC. That right there is approximately TDC when that line is about 2 o'clock. Cams are all up, so we should be good to go. Wish me luck. All right, we have our first major update here. We have the cam carrier off, locked in place. All the little rockers are there. Here is the head. Actually looks pretty clean so far. So next step is to get the EGR and the exhaust off of there. Then the head comes off. Wish me luck. We are about to finally remove the head. The sequence that I found online is do it in 3 passes, X pattern revolving from the outside. So let's go. Okay, that's the first pass. It's starting to rain. Good. The world's smallest breaker bar here. piece of something stuck in my hand. Alright, I think we're going to try to remove those manifold studs and then lift this thing off. Alright, now the head is coming off. The head is officially off, and when we look here, you can see there's a lot of carbon buildup and all that kind of junk, the usual stuff. But right there, very obviously a little more clean, like it has been getting water blasted, which makes sense for what happens with these things. Inside of the cylinders actually still has the original like cross hatching and stuff in there, so in general I think it's in really good shape inside. So we'll clean this up a little bit and keep moving. Good morning. It is day 2 of the Prius head gasket repair, head replacement process. Yesterday, it took about 4 hours to get the whole head assembly completely removed. That did include a few short little breaks and a few times stopping to figure out what the hell I was doing and how I was going to do certain things. There were a few parts that really caught me up. So I mentioned that this isn't necessarily going to be a how-to video, it's more of a can I do it? But I think it's necessary to show you guys some of the stuff that is going to catch you up when you're going through this whole process. So for the second half of this video, putting the head back on, replacing everything, I'm going to try to focus on the little gotcha areas and things you need to figure out how to do before you start getting back into this, because there are chunks of this that if you get caught up, you could lose half an hour just trying to figure it out. So I'm hoping to help you get that straightened out a little faster. Another thing, you don't have to have this. You can do this all with normal hand tools for the most part, but something that I haven't purchased so far and haven't really had a good reason to was an electric ratchet. And this car, taking off the timing cover and all the studs for like the exhaust manifold, all that kind of stuff, you are constantly reaching into really tight spaces and using your fingertips to turn these little tiny things. My hands hurt today, which isn't abnormal for this type of work, but I thought I've wanted one of these for a while. I went to Lowe's, just picked it up for $100. I already have the other Cobalt set, the batteries and everything worked for it. So if you see yourself doing this, any kind of work like this again in the future, highly recommend just getting an electric ratchet. I'll show you guys how that works. Also, we're going to step back here. I will show you the actual pile of stuff. So here's all the parts and everything. It looks like chaos, but it actually is fairly well organized. Have our timing cover there, valve cover, cam train. This is just the old gasket laying here on top, which is pretty beat up. EGR, which I'm going to clean before I put back on. Here's the old head. You can see there's a lot of carbon buildup. Just not really surprising stuff for 115,000 miles and having never been in there. And here is the shiny, beautiful, refurbished one, ready to go on once I get everything put together. In addition to that, there's the timing chain, other random pieces here, the oil pump, throttle body, cam tensioner. This was all kind of haphazardly stuck together last night at the end when I was cleaning up. Also, you see here, highly recommend doing this if you're taking anything apart, like the timing cover, that you not necessarily remember exactly how all these bolts go. There are different sizes. I believe it's a 12 and a 14 and a 10 on this. So I drew it out. That people do that often with like the bell housing too on cars.
We have our other new parts here. Timing equipment, which I'm honestly not sure I'm even going to use yet. It looks like it's in really good condition. We have our whole gasket set and our bolts for the head. And I just stepped in a puddle of oil. Wipe that off. Another thing that I mentioned in the last video, but you may have not seen that. It rained last night. And when you're doing this type of work, any work that you have to take the cowl off the car, which is the part where like the wipers and everything connect, if you're leaving the car outside overnight, there's a huge gap, probably 6-10 inches between the hood and the windshield. And if it's raining, all that water is going to go straight down the windshield into the top of the engine. And now the top of the engine is wide open. Really don't want any water getting in there, so I made sure I covered the car in plastic before I went in last night, and it poured. So I got lucky that I actually remembered to do that. I also need to make sure my torque wrenches are calibrated appropriately. It's gonna be a long day. I'm not sure I'm actually gonna get this thing done today. Today is New Year's Eve, and I'd like to actually spend some time just relaxing this weekend, so we'll see. The first thing I'm gonna do right now is clean up the top of the engine block. I've seen a lot of people do this, but just like scraping it down or just sanding it down without like blocking off the ports or the tops of the pistons or anything. Seems like a bad idea. So I'm gonna do some cleaning and some prep, and then I'm probably gonna try to sand it with a really fine grit sandpaper. I'll see what I have laying around. Let's do it. So we have the top of the block cleaned up here. Pretty nice, ready to go. Have the exhaust manifold cleaned up a little bit too. What I'm going to do next is place the head gasket on there and probably get the head seated, but not actually start mounting all that stuff yet. You can see a few bolts here that I had to transfer from the old head to the new. We have the nut for, I believe this is where the EGR mounts. We have a bracket for some wiring that comes through, a hose for coolant, a sensor, I assume temperature sensor. I don't think anything on the back side yet. There are a couple O-rings that I'm going to have to replace or utilize the existing. I'm going to try to replace. I have the gasket kit here. Came with head gasket, exhaust manifold, spark plug tubes, crank, one of the EGR, valve cover, water pump, and a bunch of little O-ring and some other EGR and valve stems. I'm not going to use all of this stuff. I'm debating on whether or not even reusing the original stainless exhaust manifold gasket, because it's still in very reasonable shape, and this is stainless. It's not going to blow out. So actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm probably just going to use this again. So that's what our next step is. We'll get the head on the car. Something I forgot to mention here, when the head goes back on, the exhaust manifold is in a very precarious spot compared to the block itself, so it can be really difficult to get that gasket back in there. So transfer at least the top two studs here onto the exhaust side of your manifold and just set the gasket in place so that you're not trying to fish around back there. I think it'll make your life a lot easier. Well, it just started raining, which is extremely inconvenient, so I have an umbrella up now, but I wanted to show you. Here's the gasket, Velcro gasket. It's pretty obvious which way this thing goes. It only fits one way, so just kind of test fit it, wiggle a little bit before you actually squish it down. So the head is on, sitting on there at least. We're gonna wait to put all of the little valve train stuff in there yet, like the roller rockers and lifters, all that kind of stuff, the caps.
There is a bunch of that. There's nothing particularly complicated about putting that on other than not forgetting to put it on. So what I'm going to do now is get the bolts ready to be torqued down. I have to make sure my torque wrench actually works correctly. So we'll see you back here in a little bit. Right. We are basically ready to start installing our head bolts. So we're going to make sure we put this down to 36 foot-pounds on our torque wrench. Make sure that you have all of these washers. Each head bolt has a washer. The new bolt kit did not come with new washers, but there shouldn't be any issue with using the old ones. Just make sure there's not a bunch of junk on them. Also, what I'm going to do is lightly oil these threads so that I can get proper torquing on them. But beyond that, we should be good to go. Alright, all of our bolts are a little oiled. Get them placed in here. Make sure you got the washers. Use our M12 12 point, get them started. Now we're going to use our fancy new electric ratchet to just get them down a little more. I'm going to use my actual impact because I have a much better feeling for how it's working. It's super bent. Alright, I don't like how bent that one was, so I'm going to use one of the originals just for this cylinder, or just this spot. Those are snug. Time to start torquing. Once again, this is 36 foot-pounds and just basically crisscross moving outward. We're going to put more oil on these threads and we're going to come right back. GoPro, stop recording. GoPro, stop recording. Alright, what I did was re-soak the threads in oil because I don't think I did that well enough. It felt like when I was tightening them, it wasn't getting the right amount of torque on it. They were kind of bouncing around. So, oiled them, gonna put them back in here. Make sure, once again, you keep your washers in there. Sit on top of the heads, and then we'll retorque them 36 foot-pounds, 90 degrees, and 45 degrees. Okay. Lock that bad boy down. I'm gonna go around again, just check and make sure they're all clicking. That I'm going to call a success. So now we have to do the final torquing. Okay, first one, 90 degrees. Start in there. Come straight to me. That's the first pass. Now, same thing, but 45 degrees. Probably gonna need to be a little more precise on this one. All right. That is the torquing sequence done. That's pretty easy. Just get a breaker bar and make sure you have a calibrated torque wrench. Now we're going to put in all the lifters, caps, a lot of other junk here. Ooh, actually, no. What I'm going to do now is attach the exhaust manifold for its final installation, and also begin putting the EGR system back in. Right now, when all this top crap's off, is probably the best time to do this. Otherwise, you will play hell getting in there. So that's what I'm going to tackle now. So I mentioned there's some stuff on the driver's side of the head that you should try to get in there while it's just the head before you get the EGR on. And I'm going to show you what that is right now. There is this coolant pipe, the coolant temp sensor, and then this coolant pipe back here, all attached below where the EGR mounts, which is right here. Also, while you're in here and you're at this point and the EGR is not in here, it'd be good to go back in and tighten the bolts for this metal coolant pipe. That'll make your life a lot simpler. That took me a significant amount of time to get that out before when I wasn't doing the head. Okay, moving. Alright, we're putting together the fuel injectors right now. The kit that I got, the Pro Gasket kit, has all the little new seals that go into the head and actually the top of the injector itself. Make sure you clean these up because these were insanely filthy on my car. And then put them in the block here. We'll keep on going. Alright, update. It is much later in the day. Still December 31st though. Had to go do some errands, but we are back. The head is on the car, torqued down. EGR is bolted in place. Connections are all in. Fuel rail and injectors are on the car. All of the lifters are in. One thing that I wanted to make sure everybody knew here, it's in the other videos if you're watching them. Under each lifter, I'll pull this back. Under each lifter is a little cap. Oof. Little tiny thing. Sits on top of the valve. Make sure you get all those in there. There's one for each valve. They're small, easy to lose. Just make sure you do that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to clean up the bottom of the cam carrier and the top also, but prep this thing to go back on top of the head here so we can keep on moving. So that's the next step. We have the cam carrier fully prepped, cleaned, ready to go on. What I have to do now is put the bead of silicone all the way around the outside of the head here. This is kind of the point of no return. So we'll see how this goes. Alright, we have our Permatex black. Put our bead around there. Trim this. I do have to trim this. Hold tight. So the silicone goes on front, back, and driver's side. The passenger side stays open because the oil actually flows through there. as we're doing this, we're compressing the valves, so it's going to be interference with the cams here. That's why it's going to be a little more tricky to get this thing placed. These are only 20 foot-pounds, so it's going to be pretty chill. Okay. Starting to get dark out here again. So the cams are back on. Now I'm just going to clean up the front timing cover a little more. So this is the front timing cover. As you can see, there's no real gasket thing here, but there's a bunch of this existing, basically RTV that was on there before. So what we are going to do, clean it up and prep it, but it's important to note where all that was. So my finger is following it all the way around, I guess basically the outside edges here, around the water jacket, but also important up here, this bolt hole, there's a 10mm that goes right here, that gets sealant also. Gotta make sure to remember that. I just found something that I have not seen in any videos so far that is very important to note. So this is the front timing cover. That's the top of the engine, bottom, crank hole, water pump. This right here in the center, there is a 10mm bolt. That's not hard to see when you're doing this. But what I just found when I was cleaning this thing up that was still stuck to this timing cover, there is a washer that goes under that 10mm bolt head that has a rubber grommet on it. And that would have just been lost. I had no idea that was there, never saw it, never saw a mention of it anywhere either. So keep that in mind, look for that. That is a helpful tip because you're gonna have a leak. Good morning and welcome back to the garage. Once again, this is day 3. Today is January 1st, 2024. We're gonna finish this damn thing today. Where we are right now is the head and cam carrier are on. The fuel injection is back in. Part of the EGR is in. Connection of the manifold's in. I need to clean up the timing cover and get that back on. And obviously water pump and this other crap that's laying around down here. It's a beautiful morning. Hopefully there'll be a nice day today and no rain. So wish me luck. Wow. And yeah, we'll see how this goes. So we have the timing cover cleaned up, went around it. There's a lot of
goop that gets stuck in these holes on the backside. I don't know if it's critical to get it out of there because it's not going to necessarily go inside the engine, but there are all these little rings of old sealant like that. What I found worked best was just get my cheapo Harbor Freight pick, push it up against the edge like this, and just work your way around slowly, and it kind of peels it off. And then just blow it out with brake cleaner, carb cleaner, whatever you got. The next thing that I did to actually clean off these surfaces, of course it's not here, I used cleaner. I had carb cleaner laying around, so I used that, and a brass wire brush. That was the easiest way that I found to really break it up and strip it off there. Otherwise I'd be there with a razor blade forever. I don't have any abrasive pads or anything. I imagine like a Scotch-Brite, something like that would work too, but I just used what I had laying around. Also, what I just finished was removal and replacement of the crank seal itself. There's the old one. I don't think it was necessarily bad, but definitely while you're in there, might as well do it. It comes with the gasket kit. So how I did that, I just used, I think I used this. Just used a big socket, basically. I had two of them here. One of them is 1.25 quarter, and the other one I have for something. What did I buy this for? Oh, this is an axle, 1.5 inch. And so just put it on there, tap it out with a hammer, like just set it in there like that, and then just whap it around slowly. It's just rubber, it'll come out, be careful. And then I reseated the new one. You'll see there's a little bit of an angle around the edge of this. So the old one was approximately where the top edge of it was just at the bottom of that angle, so you don't actually see any machined surface in the gasket seat there. So I think that'll be okay. That's how I've done it before. It doesn't really seem like there's any clearance issue on either side of it. Just make sure you keep that thing clean. And that's the most important part, putting this back together. Everything has to be clean, clean, clean. Hope that helps. We have the timing cover is pretty much prepped. I'm gonna have to make sure I clean all the bolts before I put those back in, but the next thing we gotta do here is actually get into the front side of the engine and clean all that stuff off the same way we just did with the timing cover, get all the goop off. So let's dive into that. We have the surface of the engine, surface of the timing cover cleaned up. I'm gonna take these bolts now, go through each one of them, clean up the threads however much I need to. And then I think we are very close to putting this thing back on. We just cleaned up all the bolts. I used my bench grinder with a big wire brush on it. A lot of them were fairly clean, but I would say half of them had just junk on them. So if you want to save yourself some time, I think that thing costs like 80 bucks. Extremely helpful for this kind of thing, cleaning up bolts. So I'm going to sit there with a wire brush for like an hour. That's done. Now I think we're going to put the timing chain and everything back on. Yeah, I think that's next. See you over there. So in preparation for putting this timing kit back on there, I think, against other advice, I'm going to reuse the previous stuff because in general it's in really good condition. The whole inside of the engine looks amazing, and I don't know that it necessarily needs it. The car only has 115,000 on it. It's a chain, it's not a belt, so I'm not overly concerned with it. Here is the original tensioner, and I'll show you how to reset this. It's not that hard, but gotta have a little bit of hand strength. So when it's in the car, it's typically like that, extended. So what you need to do is push this little rocker here in, which allows it to go back down. And then once it's down, just move this little hook into place, and then your tensioner is good to go again. Also, here's the little gasket that came off of it. It was seeping a little bit. I think what I'm going to do is put a small just bead of RTV around here to try to seal it up a little bit. Everything else is in really good condition. All right, we have the timing chain back on. Tensioners, not the tensioners, the guides are also in. The marks on it are really self-explanatory. It's pretty awesome. For the front cam, intake cam, this groove lines up with those two in the middle. For the exhaust cam, there's a mark on the pulley here, lines up in the middle of that tooth. And then down here on the crank itself, I did not take off the oil pump chain, but up on the crank there's a little dot that goes right in the center of that yellow chain link. So they make it fairly idiot proof, and then there are only 2 bolts that hold the front tensioner in place, and the back one has, the front guide in place, and then the rear one actually has the tensioner on it that puts the tension on the whole system. So wasn't too hard to put back in. We're gonna keep moving. We are to the point of no return here. The timing cover is prepped. The surfaces on the engine are prepped. Everything's cleaned. What I need to do now is lay down my bead of silicone. Very important, do not forget here, on the cylinder head itself, where it lines up with this part of the timing cover up near the top, there are 2 little O-rings. Need to make sure they're there and or replaced. Those mount in the cylinder head itself. On the front of the timing cover here, put this over, down where our oil filter connects, there are 2 O-rings that actually mount into the cover itself. So do not forget that. 2 O-rings in the cylinder head, 2 O-rings in the timing cover. There is another one. It's in the block itself, down there on the rear side of it, behind the rear cam guide, or cam chain guide. I do not have a replacement for it, so I'm leaving it. It looks okay, but just note it is there. So in total there are, I believe, 5 O-rings that need to be in the right place for this cover to go back in. We are back. It's been like an hour and a half since we started putting on the timing cover. Got everything in place, and then the tensioner did not release, and the timing was off by a lot. I'm not even sure how much. So I'm back, I have the whole thing torn back apart, cleaned up, ready to go back on now. I'm really not sure how I'm going to get this tensioner to engage if it didn't do it before. A little concerned about that. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. Okay, this is probably the biggest piece of advice I can give you based on what just happened to me. I put the timing cover back on, put the timing tensioner in, and you're supposed to be able to turn the crank to release the tensioner because it's got a little clip on it, and then that puts tension on the engine. I did that. It jumped time by multiple notches. So what I just did, took everything back apart, cleaned it, resealed it, put it back in there, and then after everything was tight, I reached down in here with a flathead screwdriver, and that's the rear chain guide that goes up against the tensioner. Put a little bit of pressure on it, that releases the hook, and then that got the tensioner to expand without having to turn the engine over, without having to risk losing time. So
if you're doing this service where you're taking this whole thing apart and you have the valve cover off and all this crap, release the time that way to be certain, or release the tensioner that way to be certain that you did this correctly and your timing lines match up and everything. That just took about 2 hours out of the process. Okay, we have the timing cover on. We already covered that. Just got the engine mount back in. Not too complicated. Just got to raise and lower the engine a little bit with a jack. Water pumps on. Hoses connected. Reservoirs back connected. My best advice here, what I'm seeing, it's pretty obvious. As you move your way back up the engine, just install the things that are at the bottom as you work your way up. Next, we're going to tackle the EGR and probably the valve cover. We're actually pretty close. Let's do this. It is nighttime again. Day 3. We're buttoning things up here. This is actually going to go fairly smoothly. One minor problem is that I lost a hose, so I got to find that. But we are closing in here. Now, need to go down here and get that stuff connected. So to get the crank bolt back on there, it's supposed to be torqued to like 190. I don't have a torque wrench for that. I don't have a way to brace it. I'm going to put some medium strength thread locker and just hit it pretty hard with the electric impact, and I think that'll be more than sufficient. And we're gonna call that good. All right, it is like 7:30 p.m. on January 1st. I just buttoned up the last of the engine on the Prius. I spent probably 45 minutes looking for 2 hoses that had just fallen down inside the front of the engine area. So I'm not starting it tonight. Gonna give the Permatex time to cure overnight. So when I come home tomorrow from work, I'll put fluids back in the car and give it a whirl. We'll see what happens. It is January 2nd. The car has officially been sitting now with the gasket maker curing for over a day. So what I'm going to do, put the fluids back in and try to start it up. Cross your fingers. The oil is off the dipstick, so I'm just going to add a bunch until we figure out how high it needs to be. That's about 2 quarts. This is basically everything that came out of the car, so we'll see how far off that is when we go back in here. My back is so sore. Our fancy Toyota Long Life coolant. This stuff's only a couple bucks more than the off-brand, so you might as well just get the right stuff and do it right. Okay, just do a quick once-over, make sure everything's connected, and then we're going to start the car. This is it, moment of truth. Let's see how this goes. Oh, I'm nervous. No matter how many times you check this stuff, don't know until you start it. Well, it says I need to check the hybrid system. Not sure what that means. So we went to start the car for the first time. We're getting this error. The check hybrid system, stop the vehicle in a safe place. That can't be cleared with just an OBD2 connector. What you need to do, from what I've seen at least, go under the hood here. First off, turn that back off. Under the hood, in the fuse box right here, that opens somehow, like that. Oh, this big white wire. If you can, pull it out. Okay, that's pulled. It is 6:40. We're gonna wait 10-15 minutes and then see what happens. All right, we're gonna reconnect the big cable here. That did something. Let's see if we can start the car now. Well, holy crap. So, the lifters are now filled with oil. Took a little bit for them to pump up. Just a little bit of stuff burning off here. Appears to be okay. Let's see what's going on inside. We are in maintenance mode. Don't know if you can see that. But the car is running and appears to be running fine. So I can see that I have a gasket there that's not in right. Gotta take that apart. Okay, I'm gonna fix this EGR that we did not put on right. The car officially runs. The oil is draining right now. Wanted to do a little break-in and let that drain out, put new oil in, new filter. While it's running, or while it's draining, I'm gonna put the cowl back on. We're very close to being done. All right, we're gonna start the car for the second time. Oil is now changed. Everything is back together. We'll see if that was a fluke the first time around. Sweet! Proof that it works. We're gonna let it run while I put the rest of the plastics on. But that is it. Alright. We are officially driving the Prius under its own power for the first time in a bit. Let's see how this goes. This is nerve-wracking. So far, no weird shudders either. That was pretty prevalent before. Even when it seemed to be running okay, switching between hybrid and normal, it would just kind of do like a... Boom. So that's it. The Prius so far appears to be running okay. It does only have like 5 miles on it, but I've started and stopped it numerous times. There doesn't appear to be anything coming out the bottom. Any leaks or anything like that, I've gotten under there and checked it a few times already. This kind of work is very nerve-wracking. The all-in cost for everything that I did here, you'll see those parts that I bought. I bought bolts, I bought the timing kit, I bought the Felpro full gasket kit, a couple other little gaskets, a couple cans of random cleaner, and the head. So that head did not have a cord charge on it. Out the door was $425. I've seen them listed for $350 at other places that I was unable to get a hold of. You may be able to get it for less than that. So the head was $425. The bolts were $72, I think. So roughly, let's call that $500 so far. The gasket kit was $122. Yeah, $122 from AutoZone. O'Reilly was $20 more, but they price matched me, and that's where I got all of these parts, other than the head, obviously. So that puts us up to what, $620 now. The gasket, extra gaskets that I got were obviously included in that gasket kit. There was the front crank seal and a couple little oil O-rings. I would say overall, I didn't use a lot of the gaskets that were in there. The intake gasket I had just replaced 2 months ago, so that was, I just didn't need to. The exhaust gaskets were kind of the composite gasket type that's partially metal, partially something that's compressible. The original gaskets that were in there were stainless steel. They were in good shape. I just cleaned them up a little bit, put those back, so I didn't use those. There appeared to be a full set of additional injector gaskets that I didn't use, but I did use half of the injector gaskets. The valve stem seals come in that kit. Those were already on my new head, so I didn't need those. And what else didn't I use out of that kit? Probably a few more things. So all in, you could probably get all the gaskets you need for $80, maybe $90. I figured for $120 and not really knowing how many new gaskets I would need, it was well worth that little extra money. And now I'll have them around for future because I'm sure I'll be working on this car more. The timing kit, that was $190, but I did not end up using it. I think I showed you guys a decent amount that the timing system was in really good condition. The whole inside of that engine was in great shape. And I honestly trust original Toyota parts over aftermarket name brand or non-name brand that I don't know parts. So I'm confident in leaving those as is. And then other little random pieces here and there, cleaning stuff, all that kind of junk. So all in, I would say it was about $650. I saw quotes ranging anywhere from $1,500 up to $3,500, depending on where you are. Again, this all started Friday afternoon, and I needed it done as soon as possible. So I really didn't have time to go to a shop, have them price it out, have a machine shop involved, all that kind of stuff. I had to get it done and bag it out as soon as possible. Unfortunately, it did take the entire, basically 3-day New Year weekend. But now I think we have a good working car here again for my wife and I to use as a secondary car because, surprise, surprise, the water pump in the BMW is going out, and that'll be the next video that you see. So thank you again. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you on the next one.